She stood in the doorway, keys dangling from her fingers like it was just another Tuesday. "I'm heading out," Elena said lightly, her voice breezy, like she hadn't rehearsed the words a dozen times in front of the mirror. "We're out of detergent and the fridge is a graveyard. Thought I'd grab some things." She offered a smile. "Quick, faint. The kind you give a cashier or a neighbor, not your husband." David glanced up from his laptop and nodded, his mind still half lost in an email draft. "You want me to come?" he asked, but not insistently. "Just routine. Habit," she laughed. A little too fast, a little too high. "You? Volunteering for grocery duty? That's new." "I'm evolving," he said with a smirk, shutting his laptop. "But if you're enjoying your quiet errand time, I can let you have that." No, it's fine," she said. "I won't be long." David watched the door close behind her. The click of the lock was soft but final. He wouldn't have thought twice about it if not for the silence that followed. It was something small, almost imperceptible. But David had always been the kind of man who noticed things. The way people avoided eye contact when they lied, the faint hesitations, the breaks in patterns. And lately Elena had been full of small breaks. She had started taking longer showers, answering texts with a tilt of the phone screen. She laughed less, or maybe just not with him. An hour later, still seated at the kitchen counter, David glanced at the time. She should have been back. It didn't take an hour to grab milk and paper towels. On a whim, part curiosity, part unease, he pulled up their bank account. Elena had once called him obsessive for checking statements daily. He called it attentive. The charges told a different story. No supermarket receipt, no household goods. Just a single transaction from a boutique wine shop downtown. Verde Vino, a place she had never mentioned before. David clicked on the merchant's name, curiosity tightening into suspicion. The place had a reputation. Upscale, romantic, a spot for whispered conversations and shared glances. Not laundry detergent. He grabbed his keys without even realizing it, muscle memory driving him forward while his thoughts caught up. He wasn't angry. Not yet. But he needed to see. The streets were quiet as he drove. He parked a block away, not because he had something to hide, but because he wasn't ready to be seen. When he spotted the shop, his stomach tightened. A moment later, the door opened and Elena stepped out, her coat unbuttoned, cheeks flushed with that pink glow he hadn't seen in months. She was holding a wine bottle wrapped in tissue and ribbon. Then she smiled, not at him. Across the street, a man walked up. Elena's smile deepened. Intimate, easy, alive. And then she handed the bottle to him like it was a gift. David sat still in the car, watching from the shadows. It was just an errand, she'd said, but now he wasn't so sure. David didn't drive away. He just sat there, motionless behind the steering wheel, heart pounding like he'd sprinted rather than coasted down a suburban road in his modest silver SUV. From across the street, the windshield framed a scene that looked more like a memory from someone else's life than his own. Elena stood close to the man now, tall, stylish, with the kind of tailored coat that suggested he didn't shop off the rack. She leaned in slightly when she laughed, her posture open, as if they'd known each other for years. She handed him the bottle, and it wasn't just a casual exchange, it was intimate, deliberate, a gesture wrapped in meaning. The man, David didn't know his name yet, but that wouldn't last, reached for the bottle with one hand and gently touched Elena's wrist with the other, his fingers brushing hers in a way that made David's stomach knot. That touch, light and confident, said everything words didn't have to. It was the kind of familiarity born from repetition, from practice. Then came the kiss, not passionate or overly showy, but confident, brief, intentional, the kind of kiss people shared when no one was supposed to be watching, but they still wanted it to mean something. Elena didn't hesitate, didn't look around, didn't seem worried about being caught. That, more than anything else, sent a chill through David's spine. He didn't get out of the car. He didn't storm across the street or shout or call her name. That wasn't his way. David wasn't impulsive or dramatic. He was methodical, steady. and right now he was trying to make sense of how the woman he shared a bed with had managed to build an entire secret within the spaces of their everyday life. His mind spun in quiet fury, jumping back through conversations from the past few weeks. How many times had she said she needed to run out for a few things? How many vague references had she made to errands or last-minute stops? There had been the day she came home late, claiming traffic was to blame. The evening she forgot to bring back dinner and shrugged it off with a distracted apology. The weekend she said she needed time to clear her head and took a walk for hours. Each moment had seemed small, until now. David looked again across the street. Elena and the man had turned the corner, disappearing from view. His impulse was to follow them. Instead, he sat back, exhaled slowly, and gripped the steering wheel with both hands. He needed to think. Carefully. That evening, David said nothing. When Elena returned home, almost 2 hours later, empty-handed except for a carton of milk she must have picked up in haste, he simply nodded at her greeting. She moved around the house with the ease of someone who believed they were still safe. She kissed him lightly on the cheek, asked about his day, and complained vaguely about traffic on the way back. Her lie was rehearsed, but not perfect. David didn't confront her, not yet. He studied her like a stranger, noting the subtle glow in her skin, the faint, lingering scent of expensive cologne that didn't belong to him, and the relaxed tension in her shoulders that suggested she'd just come back from something or someone who made her feel seen in a way he apparently no longer did. That night, as Elena showered, David sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the receipt he had fished out of the trash can beneath the sink. Verd Vino, 1 bottle, $118.37, wrapped, gift ready. She hadn't bought it for them, not for dinner, not for the weekend. It had been a gift. For him. For the man she smiled at with eyes that hadn't looked at David the same way in months. The next morning, David skipped his usual jog. Instead, he did something uncharacteristic. He called out of work, said he wasn't feeling well. He wasn't lying, exactly. His chest ached, but not from illness, from the slow, methodical slicing of trust. He drove back to Verde Vino just as it opened, wanting to walk inside, see if someone remembered her, asked questions. But when he stepped out of the car, he stopped. The place looked even more elegant up close, hand-painted signage, window boxes with lavender. It wasn't a stop on a typical errand list. It was a destination for someone trying to impress. He didn't go in. Instead, he crossed the street and stood where he had parked the day before, staring at the spot where she had stood, where the kiss had happened. He was memorizing the geography of betrayal. It grounded him. That afternoon, David made another stop, this time to a quiet coffee shop downtown. He didn't need caffeine. He needed time and distance. His laptop open in front of him, he began researching private investigators. Not because he needed confirmation, he'd already seen what he needed to see, but because he needed clarity, a full picture, a timeline, proof, not for revenge, not yet, for closure, and maybe for the moment when the lie, so delicately wrapped in the tissue paper of errands and wine, would finally shatter. David returned to the boutique wine shop 2 days later, not to buy anything, but to observe. It was a Thursday afternoon, and traffic in the area was quiet. Just a few couples wandering the charming sidewalks, arms linked, peering through glass storefronts, like tourists visiting a part of the city meant for people who still believed in magic. He parked a few storefronts away this time, further from direct view, blending into the rhythm of passing cars and patient pedestrians. It wasn't chance that brought him here again. It was preparation. David had always believed that the truth, when pursued properly, revealed itself in patterns, not chaos. He had seen just enough to know something was wrong, but not enough to understand how deep the wound went. And so he watched. The boutique had a polished front, ornate gold script on the windows, elegant potted ferns, and bottles displayed like art behind glass. It didn't scream deception, it whispered exclusivity. Elena had chosen this place for a reason. David waited. The sky shifted from pale morning gray to a clearer blue as noon crept in, but still, nothing. He was about to leave when a familiar figure appeared in the distance. Elena. Her stride was calm, unhurried, and she wore that same light gray coat he'd given her for their anniversary last winter. He remembered the look on her face when she unwrapped it. Genuine surprise. At least, that's what he'd thought. Now, he wasn't sure what was real anymore. She entered the shop without hesitation, barely glancing around. It was a practiced move, as if this wasn't her first visit, but one of many. David's pulse quickened, but his hand stayed steady. He reached for the small camera he had bought that morning, tucked just beneath the dashboard. His grip was firm, but controlled. He hadn't come to confront her. He'd come to document. 15 minutes passed. He imagined her inside, chatting with the clerk, maybe selecting another bottle, something bold and meaningful. A wine chosen with care. Not for him. Then the door opened. Elena stepped out, her hair catching the light, a bag in hand with the boutique's gold-embossed logo, and she was smiling. A real, effortless smile. The kind he hadn't seen from her in a long time. Not since before the silences had started building like bricks between them. But it was what came next that shattered the last of his doubts. A man approached from the opposite side of the street. Tall, olive-skinned, dressed in a fitted coat and polished shoes, he moved with an easy confidence, the kind that came from someone used to being admired. His hair was dark, swept back casually, and even from a distance, David could see the way his eyes lit up when he saw Elena. She walked toward him like gravity pulled her. She didn't pause, didn't check her surroundings. The gift bag shifted from one hand to the other as she leaned up and placed a quick, certain kiss on his lips. Not shy, not hesitant. Intimate. And then she handed him the bag. The man laughed, easy, relaxed. Elena said something and they both smiled. Then they turned and began walking down the street together, disappearing from view behind a row of flower-laden cafe tables. David sat frozen for several moments, his hand resting on the camera. He hadn't taken a photo. He hadn't needed to. The image was already carved into his memory with surgical precision. The smile, the kiss, the handoff of the bottle. Every gesture felt rehearsed, like a scene from a film they had starred in before. The betrayal wasn't just in the kiss. It was in the ease of it all, the familiarity, the way she had slipped into another life, like she had always belonged there. Back in his car, David didn't move for a long time. His thoughts were sharp but orderly. He didn't spiral, didn't let anger take over. Instead, he focused on the stillness, trying to understand what this discovery meant. It wasn't just that she had cheated, it was how well she had concealed it, the seamlessness of the lie, the efficiency with which she had packaged it inside something as benign as a grocery run. When he finally started the engine, he didn't go home. He drove aimlessly through the city, weaving past streets that now felt unfamiliar despite their familiarity. Everything had shifted. He wasn't sure when it started, months ago, a year maybe, but what mattered now was that it had arrived here, at this exact moment, at a crossroads that couldn't be undone. By evening, he was back in the house they had shared for 13 years, a place filled with photos and quiet routines. Elena wasn't home yet, probably wouldn't be for another hour. He didn't wait for her. He walked through the house slowly, gathering a few things. Just the essentials, some clothes, toiletries, his laptop. Not because he was fleeing, but because he wanted to control the moment of exit. When Elena finally walked in through the front door, he intended to already be standing there, not with rage, but with resolution. This discovery hadn't broken him. It had clarified everything. David sat at the edge of their neatly made bed, his suitcase by the door and a small duffel bag on the floor beside his feet. The air in the bedroom was quiet but thick, like the house had already absorbed what was coming. He wasn't pacing or fidgeting. Everything about him was composed, calculated. He had always believed that how one left said more than any final speech. The receipt from Veredvino sat on the dining room table, deliberately placed where she always dropped her keys. Next to it was his wedding ring. Nothing dramatic, just quiet and symbolic. He didn't need to yell. The truth already had a voice loud enough to echo for years. Elena's car pulled into the driveway precisely at 7:12 p.m., a detail he wouldn't have noticed before, but tonight every second felt heavy. Through the front window he watched her step out of the car, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't look flustered or anxious. She looked like someone returning from a day spent comfortably in a life David was no longer part of. The door opened, her usual melodic "Hey, babe!" floating through the air before she even saw him. She rounded the corner into the dining room and froze. Her smile didn't vanish immediately. It slipped slowly, like a candle being blown out by a subtle breeze. Her eyes landed on the suitcase first, then the duffel, but it was the receipt that drew her in, snaring her attention like a tripwire. She didn't pick it up. She didn't have to. She recognized it instantly. David stepped into the room, calm and unreadable. "That was one expensive bottle," he said quietly, nodding toward the slip of paper. "I hope he's worth the price." Elena didn't move. For a few moments, she didn't even blink. Her body stood still. But David could see the shift behind her eyes, a quiet, spinning chaos. She swallowed once, then opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He waited, letting the... "David," she said at last, her voice uneven, "this isn't what you think." He tilted his head slightly. "I think you've been seeing someone else. I think you've been using Errands as cover stories, and I think you kissed him in broad daylight outside a wine shop while I was parked just across the street." His voice never rose. It didn't need to. Truth didn't shout. "I didn't plan for this," she said quickly, her words suddenly tumbling. "It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I felt disconnected. We haven't been close, and I didn't know how to talk about it." David looked at her for a long moment. "You didn't plan for this? Because watching you hand him that wine, watching you smile like you used to smile at me, that didn't feel accidental. That looked like someone who had planned very carefully." She stepped forward, her expression softening into desperation. "Please, don't go. Let's talk about this. We can work through it. I know we can." "I'm not leaving because I want to punish you," he said, stepping back to create a small but unmistakable distance between them. "I'm leaving because I've already been gone, haven't I? You just made it official." Her shoulders sagged, and her hands hung helplessly at her sides. "It was only a few times," she whispered, as if scaling down the magnitude might rewind time. David's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why do people always say that? Only a few times, like betrayal is measured in quantity instead of impact." He reached for his bag and slung it over his shoulder. "You could have come to me, Elena. You could have said you were unhappy. But you didn't. You just decided to rewrite our story and hand the edited pages to someone else." Her voice cracked. "You mean everything to me. I didn't mean to lose you." "You didn't lose me," he said without bitterness. "You gave me away." With that, he walked past her, through the front door, and down the steps into the fading evening light. He didn't look back, not once. Behind him, the door closed slowly, not with a slam, not with drama, just quietly, like the end of something sacred. He drove without a destination in mind, the city lights passing like memories he no longer needed to hold on to. For the first time in months, he felt something close to clarity. Not peace, he wasn't there yet, but honesty, and that was more than enough. Back at the house, Elena stood alone in the doorway. She didn't cry. Not yet. She was still calculating, still hoping this was temporary. But as the minutes dragged into hours and her calls went unanswered, the reality sank in. Nico, the man she had risked everything for, wasn't picking up either. Maybe he'd gotten spooked. Maybe he wasn't looking for full exposure. Maybe he liked being the secret more than he wanted to be the solution. And now she was left with the truth. The wine, the receipt, and the silence. The house didn't feel like a home anymore. The walls were the same, the furniture still arranged just as David had left it, but a certain stillness had crept in, like the air itself was mourning something. Elena wandered from room to room, not entirely sure what she was looking for. It wasn't him. She knew he wouldn't be back. But perhaps it was the sense of normalcy she had once taken for granted, the hum of his evening routine, the scent of his cologne lingering in the hallway, the faint tapping of his fingers on the keyboard late into the night. All of it was gone now. She stared at her phone, the call log filled with unanswered attempts. 10, 20, she'd stopped counting. David hadn't blocked her. That somehow made it worse. It meant he wanted her to know he was ignoring her. It meant the door wasn't just closed, it was bolted from the inside. Nico had gone silent too. At first, he offered the expected reassurances. "He'll cool off. We'll figure this out. Maybe it's for the best." But when David didn't rage or retaliate, when he simply vanished with a quiet kind of finality, Nico grew distant. He stopped texting, stopped answering. Eventually, she saw that his social media had gone dark. Whether it was guilt or self-preservation, he had withdrawn completely, leaving her to face the wreckage alone. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, the same one she and David had once shared, now neatly made on only one side. The other half, untouched for days, was a constant reminder of what used to be. She traced the seams of the comforter, her fingers lingering where his arm would have rested. No matter how much she tried to justify her choices, loneliness, disconnection, the desire to feel wanted, it didn't erase what she had done. She hadn't just broken trust, she had broken something sacred, and now she was realizing that some things couldn't be pieced back together. Friends began to ask questions. "Where's David? Is everything okay? You two always seemed so solid." She lied at first, muttering half-truths about space and needing time apart, but eventually the story surfaced in fragments through mutual acquaintances: the wine shop, the other man, the quiet departure. People began to look at her differently, not with pity, but with a subtle, disapproving distance. The kind of glance people give when they're unsure whether to comfort or condemn. David, meanwhile, had moved into a short-term rental on the other side of the city. It wasn't glamorous, just a furnished apartment above a bakery, but it was clean, quiet, and anonymous. He spent his evenings reading, going for long walks, and learning how to live in a silence he had chosen for himself. There were moments when the hurt still rose unexpectedly, like waves catching him off balance, but each day the sting lessened. He didn't need answers from Elena. He had seen all he needed. What remained now was healing. One afternoon, weeks after he left, he received an envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Elena. She didn't beg him to come back. She didn't try to rewrite the past. Instead, she wrote about regret, not just for the betrayal, but for how easily she had overlooked the quiet constancy of the man she had once promised to love. She ended the letter with a line that stayed with him for days. "You were the one person who saw me without judgment, and I traded that for a version of myself I can't even recognize anymore." David folded the letter neatly and tucked it into a drawer, not because he planned to revisit it, but because part of him needed to acknowledge her grief, too. But it didn't change his course. He wouldn't return. Elena now lived in a house filled with absence. The lie she had tried to wrap in the softness of routine had cost her more than she expected, and every time she passed the table where the receipt once sat, she was reminded that sometimes the smallest truth could shatter the biggest illusion.